They say the dead can't complain, but sometimes they can get confused, and sometimes they come looking for what was taken from them. It was past midnight when Doru Mihai started his shift in the morgue at a public hospital in northern Romania. The facility was old, outdated. Most of the lights flickered, the freezers groaned louder than they should, and half the staff pretended not to hear the noises that came from the far end of the basement hallway. Doru had only been working there for 3 months. Quiet man. Didn't ask questions. He just zipped, tagged, logged, and waited for sunrise. But that night, something was off the moment he walked in. There were 2 new arrivals, both elderly women. The paperwork said both had died in their sleep, heart failure for one, pneumonia for the other. One was named Anna Petrescu, the other Maria Longu. Different cousins, different rooms, different times. But when Doru pulled open the drawer marked Longu, Maria, and slid out the gurney, he froze. Both bodies had the same tag. Both read, Anna Petrescu. He checked the clipboard again, then the toe tags, then the chest ID stickers. Same name, same birth year, same death date. Impossible. His hands trembled as he checked their faces. They didn't look the same. One had gray curls and sharp cheekbones. The other had a drooped mouth and a deep scar above her eyebrow. These were clearly 2 different women. Maybe it was a clerical error, a mix-up at the nurse's station. Doru shook it off and went to find the correction forms. He was walking toward the filing cabinet when he heard something, a metallic clatter behind him, like something rolled off a tray. He turned. No one there, but one of the gurneys had moved slightly. Maybe the wheels weren't locked properly. He corrected it, shrugged again, but he couldn't shake the unease. He filled out the correction form. Body to incorrectly tagged as Anna Petrescu. Confirm identity as Maria Longu Dab, 1947. Correct tag applied at 1:04 a.m. He slipped the form into the admin tray. That should have been the end of it, but at 16 a.m., the motion sensor alarm at the back door went off. There was no wind, no open windows, no delivery scheduled. Doru checked the monitors. The camera feed glitched. For 5 full seconds, the screen turned to static. When it came back, one of the bodies was missing. The drawer that had held the woman with the sharp cheekbones, the original Anna Petrescu, was empty. Doru panicked. At first, he thought maybe he was hallucinating. Maybe he was sleep deprived. But no, the gurney was gone. Then he saw it. Down the hallway, barely lit by flickering bulbs, a figure turned the corner. Hospital gown, long white hair. Doru ran after her. He rounded the corner. No one, only the body, lying neatly on a different gurney in the middle of the hallway. Tag now read, Maria Longu. Doru stood still for several seconds, unable to breathe. The body was now lying perfectly still, back on a gurney, yet somehow in the hallway. The tag, freshly written in his own handwriting, now read Maria Longu. But that couldn't be. He hadn't moved the body. He hadn't re-tagged it. And, more than that, this wasn't the same body. He leaned closer. His fingers trembled as he examined the tag, the face, the scar above the eyebrow. This was the other woman now, the one who had been in the second drawer, the one originally labeled Maria Longu. But he had seen the body in the morgue just minutes ago. So how was she here? Who had moved her? He checked the drawers again. The first one was still empty. The second one, which had been occupied by the original Maria, now held no one, no sheet, no tag, just a faint, musty warmth, like someone had been lying there moments ago. Doru's breath quickened. He backed away from the gurney and locked the morgue door behind him. He went upstairs, found a nurse on duty, and told her about the tag confusion. He didn't mention the moving bodies, didn't mention the camera glitch, just the tag error, just updated in the log. It happens, she said, barely glancing at him. Back at the morgue, Doru opened the logbook to make the changes. As he began to write, something made him stop. The corrections were already made. The same exact correction form he had filled out earlier now had a second line under his handwriting, timestamped to 35 a.m. It read, "Correction reversed. Petrescu was correct. Initials, ML. Doru's heart sank. ML. Maria Longu." He stared at the signature. The handwriting wasn't his, but the pen used was identical. The log, ink still glistened. Suddenly, the lights overhead flickered violently, buzzing like they were about to burst. Doru jumped, then the temperature dropped. He could see his breath. There was a whisper, a soft one, a woman's voice, right behind him. He spun around, nothing. But the drawer he had locked earlier was now slightly open. Hands trembling, he walked over slowly, step by step. The tag hanging off the side read, "Anna Petrescu, deceased, 11:54 p.m." But lying inside wasn't Anna. It was the woman with the scar above her eye, the one he had confirmed as Maria. His vision blurred, his chest tightened. He pulled out both drawer files. Both read Anna. The morgue had two identical documents, two identical names, but to different faces. He knew what this was now. Not a clerical error. Something was wrong with the names, as if someone had taken someone else's identity in death. The next morning, a supervisor arrived. Doru reported the issue, the double tagging, the changing bodies, the emotional alarm. He carefully left out the supernatural details. The supervisor listened, made a note, and asked casually, "Didn't this happen last year too? Same drawer?" "I think same names." Doru froze. "Same names." The supervisor shrugged. "Not exactly the same. Maybe similar." A nurse swore she saw a patient standing in the hallway 2 days after she died. The body tags had been swapped. "We fired someone for it." Doru's hands went cold. It was a loop. It had happened before, and he had just become the next link in the chain. That night, Doru quit. He never returned to the hospital again. But weeks later, when packing to leave town, he found something in his laundry. A toe tag, soggy, yellowed. His name printed neatly across it. Doru Mihai deceased. 2:35 a.m. same time, the correction. Log had been edited. Same time he'd heard the whisper. They say every hospital has one room no one talks about. Not the operating theater, not the ICU, but the place where no one's supposed to go, and yet someone always does. In a government medical college hospital in Rajasthan, the place was the old surgical scrub room, tucked between OT2 and the broken staircase no one used anymore. Students passed by it every day. A narrow, tiled room with sinks that hadn't worked in years and a small steel door at the far end, sealed shut with rusted bolts and paint that had long peeled away. No one used it, but no one questioned it either, except for Vikrant. Vikrant was a third-year medical student, sharp, skeptical, overworked. He didn't believe in ghost stories, and certainly not the ones passed around between late-night chai breaks. Still, the rumors clung to that scrub room like mold. People said you could sometimes hear water running behind the locked door, that during night shifts, shadows moved inside even when the room was empty. Some said it had once been a dissection prep area. Others whispered it had been used for unsanctioned surgeries during the 80s. The truth, no one knew, and that irritated Vikrant more than the ghost stories. So, during one long 36-hour shift, when most of the staff had left and the OTs were silent, Vikrant decided to satisfy his curiosity. The hospital halls were dead quiet at 2:43 a.m. Only the buzzing of tube lights and the occasional hum of the oxygen line broke the silence. Vikrant made his way to the old scrub room with a flashlight in one hand and a crowbar he borrowed from the maintenance closet. The room smelled like wet iron and phenol. The tile floor was sticky in places, as if something had leaked and dried 100 times over. He approached the metal door bolted, the top hinge half broken. He hesitated for just a second, then pried. With a screech loud enough to wake the dead, the bolt came loose. The door creaked open. A dark corridor lay behind it, narrow, dusty. The walls were tiled like the scrub room, but stained with age and something darker at ankle level, like old blood washed 1,000 times but never fully erased. Vikrant shone the flashlight inside. It barely reached the end. But what struck him wasn't the corridor. It was the sound, the faint, unmistakable drip of running water. And beneath it, soft, wet, rhythmic scrubbing, hands against porcelain. But no voices. He stepped inside. The air was thick, heavy, and unnaturally cold. The flashlight flickered. He tapped it, and it steadied. The corridor extended 10 feet before ending in another door, half open. He pushed it gently. Inside was what looked like an abandoned surgical prep room. Sinks lined the wall. Rusted trays were scattered on counters. Tools lay soaked in dried black residue. But what froze Vikrant in place was the figure at the far sink. A man in surgical scrubs. Back turned, arms scrubbing violently under the faucet. There was no water, but he kept scrubbing, over and over. Red-raw hands moving in circular, frantic motion. Vikrant opened his mouth to speak, but something stopped him. There was a smell now. Not blood, not chemicals. Something worse. Burnt flesh. The man paused, then slowly, he turned his head sideways. Not all the way, just enough to show a cracked smile. Skin stretched far too tight, eyes sunken. He spoke without moving his lips, still dirty. Vikrant stumbled back. The flashlight dropped from his hand, rolled once, and settled, its beam casting a long, grotesque shadow across the room. The man in scrubs turned fully now. His body was soaked, not with water, but with something thick and dark that clung to his sleeves and dripped from his fingers. His skin looked blistered, like it had been dipped in boiling antiseptic. But somehow, it wasn't pain he radiated. It was ritual, as if the scrubbing was part of some ancient duty he could never finish. "They're watching the hands," the figure whispered. They always watched the hands. Then the lights flickered, just once, and he was gone, vanished, as if he'd been carved out of the air. Vikrant backed out of the room, heartbeat slamming in his ears, hands shaking. But something kept him rooted at the threshold. Some part of him, stubborn, rational, too proud, wanted an explanation. He picked up a flashlight and scanned the room again. Everything was still empty. Then the sinks turned on. All at once, a loud, hissing surge of water from every faucet. But it wasn't water. It was red, thick, warm, metallic blood. Vikrant ran. He didn't look back until he was past the door and halfway down the corridor. He yanked the outer scrub room door shut and threw the bolt back in place. Only when he reached the resident lounge did he realize his sleeves were soaked. Not sweat, not water, blood. He stripped off the coat and scrubbed his arms in the washroom sink until they turned raw. But no matter how much he cleaned, the smell lingered. Iron, burnt tissue, hospital death. He didn't sleep that night. The next day, he tried to report it, but no one listened. The head of surgery raised an eyebrow. "That room, it's been sealed for decades. You couldn't have gotten in." The maintenance office checked the door. The bolt was untouched, rusted shut, no sign of it ever being opened. Vikrant didn't argue. He just nodded, left the office, and went straight to the medical archives. There, buried in the hospital's incident logs from the early 1980s, he found it. A single-page record. One sentence, faded typewriter font. Dr. Samir body found dead in scrub room 2. Body severely burned. Suspected chemical exposure. Cause undetermined. Room sealed indefinitely. He asked the librarian who Dr. Body was. Resident surgeon, she said. Brilliant. Obsessed with surgical hygiene. Died during a late shift. Some say he lost his mind. Was found scrubbing himself. Raw. Vikrant said nothing. Weeks passed. Vikrant tried to forget, tried to focus on exams, on rounds, on late-night chai and anatomy lectures. But the smell would return, randomly, midway through a procedure, in the cafeteria, once even at home. And then came the dreams of dripping sinks, of blood-caked gloves, of hands scrubbing endlessly under dry faucets. The worst part, his own hands were beginning to itch. It started as a mild irritation. He switched soaps, changed, gloves. Nothing helped. Then the skin began to peel. First the fingertips, then the palms, then the wrists. Every night, he found himself washing, longer and longer, until his roommate started to ask questions. One night, nearly 6 weeks after the incident, a final straw broke. Vikrant was assisting in an emergency appendectomy when the power flickered in OT3. Backup lights came on. For 2 seconds, he was alone with the patient. He looked down and his gloves were gone. His hands were red dot wet, scrubbed raw. And then a whisper right behind his ear. Still dirty. He screamed. They said it was a panic attack. Stress-induced, common among students. He was pulled from rotations for a week. But Vikrant didn't go home. Instead, he returned to the hospital that night, climbed down to the scrub room corridor, and stood outside the door one last time. The bolt was rusted, sealed, but now, it looked like something had scratched the inside. Long, deep nail marks running down the steel. He didn't try to open it. He just stared. 4 hours, and finally walked away, hands buried in his coat, fists clenched, nails cutting into his palms. Still scrubbing. Even when they bled,